Hi, everybody. This is a video I'm recording to talk you through my MLA slides on MLA formatting and citation. This should probably say citation because this is more about citation. There's another, I guess I do cover formatting. Anyways, there's another set of slides that I posted where I talk you or I guide you through how to format a paper using Word. But anyways, this one is more about citation and the general rules of MLA. So let's take a look at this. So I've opened up the slides. These are available, of course, in module 15, week 15. So let's skip down here. What is MLA style? MLA stands for Modern Language Association. That's a governing body for academics and researchers that decides technical rules for presenting research in written format, for citations and papers, for how to format things. It covers all the technical aspects for how we present written material to share with each other, academics that is, and for students who want to engage in this kind of formatting. There are some academic journals that use this kind of formatting. So it's a body that covers all this kind of stuff, these grammatical and formatting rules. For mostly people in the humanities, liberal arts and humanities. So if you're in English or I don't know, a lot of philosophy uses it. Different disciplines sometimes use different styles or different schools, right? MLA is what I use the most as a student in English. We use this all the time. There's also APA you might be more familiar with. That's sorry, my back is hurting, so I'm using a massage chair while I shoot this. There's also APA, American stands for the American Psychological Association. That covers a lot of science disciplines use that. Then there's Chicago, which is a different kind of style and mostly used by historians, and I think there's some journalists who use it. Anyways, different styles. They're very similar. Once you learn one, you can make the changes between them. It's just it's good to learn one really well. So we're going to look at MLA, and there are three main components: formatting, in-text citations, and your works cited page. Okay, there's three components to this. The formatting. Let's skip over that. Formatting. Oh yeah, that's why I use that again. Formatting. This is like what your paper actually looks like on the page. So there's some things to think about. We don't use a title page for MLA style. APA, you have a title page. So MLA, we just jump right into it. Your first page is your first page of text. Here's what your first page should look like, right? And this got kind of screwed up here. Your last name should be over here. Your last name and your page number should be over here. And if you're unsure how to insert that into your page, check out my other slides where I talk you through how to do that using Word. And remember, this material up here should also be in Times New Roman, like everything else, right? And then you should have 4 items in your header on the top left-hand corner of your first page: your name, the professor's name, the course code, and the date. And MLA uses the day, month, year, no commas between anything. Uses that format for the date, right? It's kind of a European style. Then you center your text. Remember to capitalize all the major words in a title. Don't bold it, don't underline it, don't put it in larger font. It's just centered. That indicates it's your text or your title. And then you just jump into your paper, indent every paragraph, of course. All the text in your paper should be 12-point Times New Roman font. Everything should be double spaced, 1-inch margins. Okay, and that's the basic rules. If you have like headers and things, or like subheaders and stuff, there are rules for that, tables and such. And you can check out more extensive rules for formatting on the OWL at Purdue, right? That's the go-to website. I've given a lot of you links to that in your feedback on various essays. That's where we go. That's where everybody goes to double check things and check the rules. It's very up to date. Right, I haven't bought an MLA guide. You can buy the guides. I haven't bought one of those in years because the OWL is so good about this kind of stuff. Right, so here's one of my papers that I wrote in grad school. You can see it's formatted in the ways I was just talking about. Header, last name, page number, and there was my title, 2-line title, right? Very common in academia, and then into the paper itself right away. Right, so that's what it looks like. Now, the second thing to get into is probably more important: in-text citations. This is where you're telling your reader in the body of your paper where you're getting information from. So you're acknowledging the material required from other authors. So you're avoiding plagiarism. And this counts for direct quotations and paraphrasing. Whoops. So if you're directly quoting from an author, or if you're just putting that into your own words, you need to cite in both cases. Anytime you're taking an idea from somebody else, you need to cite. Now, it's kind of a gray line because it's I mean, let's say you go on Wikipedia to check a date, like, oh, when was Martin Luther King assassinated? You want to use that date in your paper. What was the exact date? You put it in your paper. Do you need to cite that? No, because it's common knowledge. It's in the public record, right? You got it from Wikipedia. You double check there, but it's common knowledge. It's not really a unique idea, right? Now, if you want to quote someone who claimed that MLK Jr. was shot by, oh, I don't know, the mob because he owed some money or something, you'd need to cite that person, right? Because that's a unique and very probably wrong opinion, but you'd still need to cite that, even if you paraphrased it. Okay, so we're avoiding plagiarism. We're acknowledging when we get ideas from other people, right? Don't be afraid to do that. That makes you look better in your papers. Makes it look like you're engaging in a conversation with other thinkers. And the in-text citation is just meant to point the reader to the works cited page, right? It's meant to be kind of signpost pointing to that other more extensive document at the end of your paper, your works cited page with all the information, right? So in MLA, there's a number of rules. First rule, in MLA, we just use the last name page number in the parentheses. That's all the information. You don't have PP, you don't have PG, you don't have paragraph 7, right? If there's no page number, don't worry about it, just the author's last name. Okay, so in MLA, see, like this is wrong here, no PP, right? Just the last name and the page number. Okay, that's how MLA works. So just that information in the parentheses. Second rule, pardon me, if you introduce the name of the author in your own writing, right? So I have it here. It might seem odd to consider class when capitalist employment has been in large part eradicated, but as Marx and Engels claim, so that's the authors, right? They wrote the Communist Manifesto, claimed, quote, and there's my quote, all I need is the page number. Because remember, this information here, this parentheses, is just meant to point your reader to the works cited page. So I can look and see where you got this from, right? Look at the text. Oh, the Communist Manifesto, when was that published? Who published it? That way I can look it up, but if I wanted to, and I could double check your work, right? This is a way that we as academics and writers can be completely transparent and honest with our readers. So if you introduce the author here, I, the writer, can go to your works cited page, I can find the listing for Marx and Engels, and I can look on page 3 of that. So all the information I need to trace this source is right here in your writing. Okay, so if the author is introduced in your own writing, your introduction to the quote, you don't need it here. Okay, so if you have multiple authors, we use and, right? If we have just one or two. In MLA, if there's more than two, we write Marx et al., which means just a Latin phrase that means and the rest. Okay, this is slightly different than APA. APA, you can have more authors because in APA, in science disciplines, you often have articles with a lot of authors, whereas in MLA, we don't usually have that. In like the humanities and English, it's usually a single or maybe two authors. There's not as much that scientific study thing where you have 7 or 8 authors listed on an article. Okay, so that's just multiple authors. That's rule number 3. Rule number 4, if you're using multiple sources from a single author, then you list the work itself rather than the author's last name. So this author, Emily Murphy, I'm using a couple books from her in this paper. So instead of writing Murphy 305, I write Black Candle, that specific book 305. That way, when your reader goes to look at your works cited page, there's no confusion. If I wrote Murphy 305 and I'm using 7 different books by this author, then it's going to get impossible for the reader to then trace where the information comes from, right? So if you have multiple sources from a single author, use the specific work rather than the author's name. Rule number 5, if you're using a source you've already introduced, right? So in this case, let's look here. I'm writing, here's where I got Niemeyer 67, the author's last name, page number, and then I go on, I quote some more from the same book. I don't need to include the author's last name again. Think of it like I'm opening the book for the reader. I'm saying, hey, here's page 67 where I got this information from, and I go on and I'm quote from the same book, then I just like turning the pages. Also on 204 to 243, there's this. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If you introduce the author here, then you go on and cite again, you don't need to include the last name. And this just helps keep your paper looking cleaner, right? It gets rid of some of the clutter, right? So if you spend a whole paragraph writing about one source, you just need to introduce it once by the last name and then just page number from then on. Now, it gets complicated because if I do that, I open up, I'm using this source, Black Candle, 305. I go on, I quote some more. This time it's page 303. And then I quote from a different source, Archival Grain, 6106. Okay, but then I go back to Black Candle. I need to reintroduce that book again using the author's last name or the title of the book or text. Okay, so it's just imagine after you open a text and you introduce it to a reader, it's still open. And you don't need to include all the information, but then if you switch to another one, you do need to introduce the whole text. Okay, Rule 7. If the work has no author, and this a lot of web pages and information we find online doesn't have a specific author, although you should be careful with that kind of information because it's often not as reliable, right? Use the article title, right? So in this case, the article is called Reptilian Overlords. There's no specific author listed on the website, so you just use the title of the book, right? Also, if there's no page number in a source, and this again for many websites, there's no page number, there's no pagination in like a blog entry or something, you don't need to include that. So if you had an author, you just put the author's last name. Again, this way, if I open up your works cited page, I can scan to Johnson, I can see where you got it from. Or Reptilian Overlords, right? If there was, say there was no page number and no listed author, you would just include the article title in quotation marks or italics if it's a book, okay? That's rule number 8. That was the final rule. And then switching to the works cited page. So remember, for every time you have an in-text citation, that has to point to something in your works cited page, right? There has to be this connection between the two. When I look here and I say, oh, author page 9, I have to be able to look here and see, oh, okay, here's the author, here's the book. And don't pay attention to this, is still MLA 7. But I need to be able to make that connection as the reader. That's how I can know that you're being honest with your information. I can take your quote here and I can look it up and make sure you're being honest. Okay, so your works cited page contains the full bibliographic information. So who published it, when it was published. We no longer include place of publication, but I should be able to trace it out. I should be able to find that source by using your entry on your works cited page, right? If there's a URL for a website, I like to include that. Includes all of your sources on your works cited page, or organized in alphabetical order. Each one has a hanging indent. Okay, and I'll show you what that means in a second. We use full first names in MLA. This is not APA. We italicize books and periodicals like New York Times, but not the articles and other shorter works, right? So an article published in the New York Times goes in quotation marks. New York Times goes in italics. Not numbered. We don't use bullet points or anything like that, right? So this is what a works cited page basically looks like, right? Alphabetical order, no bullet points, no numbers or anything like that. This is what a hanging indent is. The first line is flush with the left, and then every line after that is indented. Okay? So Richard Dyer's White is one entry right there. And then Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality is the next one, and it's 2 lines long. Okay? And again, this is old citation style. This is when I was in grad school. We're still using MLA 7. So different, don't pay attention to some of this, but do look at the hanging indent. That's the same. Okay? MLA 8 for works cited has the following formula, and I'm going to pick this up in a second video. So hold tight.